Hey Jujus, it's Julie. Welcome to another Read With Me, and today I'm going to be reading Prestigious Chapter 1 from my book series that I made when I was 12 called The Alphas. And if you haven't seen the prologue yet, I would advise that you see Prologue Part 1 and Prologue Part 2 first, because those come before. Now we're going to do Chapter 1, and my throat is still a little bit sore, so just FYI. And yeah, I hope this isn't too embarrassing since I wrote this when I was 12. Well, just kidding. As long as I love it, that's enough. Okay, so here we go. Chapter 1. So this is the cover that I made. And let's just skip down to Chapter 1. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1. Newbie. 8 a.m. Monday, October 9th, Gateway Academy. Wait, pause for a second. I actually used real calendars. I think it was like the year 2006 that I used as a kind of foundation for all these dates. So yeah, I used a real calendar, so all the dates correspond to the year, I think like 2006 or 2005. I don't remember which one I used. But yeah, just a funny little tidbit. I really planned that out on a calendar. Gateway Academy, the most prestigious, or if you like to pronounce it prestigious, school in North America, and Era was going to be a student there. She still couldn't believe her eyes gazing at the scene walking onto the Gateway campus, taken aback by the rose bushes scattered across the glowing green grass, and the fallen red leaves littering the grayish-pink pathway beneath Era's sneakers. She felt like she was in some classic movie. Everything seemed flawless. Even the grass was evenly cut. She had waited the whole summer for the call saying she was admitted into the school. She'd applied during May of her 9th grade year. The real reason she had applied was because she couldn't take all the hatred at her old school. Boy, was she definitely less than loved. She hadn't expected her first year of high school to have gone so completely wrong. It had been all too much for her. Gateway Academy had become her savior. Still, Era could hardly believe her ears that day in August when she'd picked up her phone and heard Professor Hochstetler's voice on the other end describing that she was receiving an academic scholarship offer. He was an important member of the school board, as in authority of Gateway as the headmaster, if not more. He'd been with the school since its early years. He'd obviously told her that her application form had been reviewed by the school board and headmaster, and that they found her fit to enroll. It was a miracle. Everyone knew how difficult it was to get into Gateway Academy. Even though they had plenty of campus ground, the school board still kept their student population controlled. They often dropped students as well, without any replacements. Pause. See, this is similar to like a K-pop trainee situation where they just like drop trainees and like it's very strict. That's kind of like just something I've noticed is like there's a similarity between the alphas and K-pop for some reason. I don't think I knew about K-pop when I was 12, but I guess the concept of being ultra strict and prestigious and like hard to get into is like an interesting and fascinating concept. Play, I guess? Wait, should I say pause and play every time I start reading and stop reading? Okay, that's a little weird. To the school board, the less students, the better, and they apparently rarely saw any application forms that met their standards. That was exactly why Era Jules was feeling so extremely special and confident on her first day of school, even though she was an overachieving student, and that was probably what got her into Gateway in the first place. At her old school, she was the staff-proclaimed perfect student. She was so happy she even had a little beat in her step. She was just that cheerful. She also knew that Gateway students were always coming and going. Loads of students being dropped each year and a handful of new students, likely from all around the world, joining the population. Era felt curious eyes on her as she walked up the stairs to the front doors, and she even caught a few whispers traveling back and forth before her fellow students. She locked eyes awkwardly with a tall, blonde-haired girl walking up behind her. The sun reflected on her peculiar diamond pinky ring, almost blinding Era. The girl didn't smile at Era, and she shifted her eyes to the front doors Era had been about to push open. Era just couldn't help but to stare at the way this girl was dressed. It was like as if she were some glamorous supermodel doll, complete with a gray fur coat reaching her knees, black leggings, and a pair of silver pumps. Was this the Gateway school attire? Had Era simply just been misinformed? Maybe Professor Hochstetler had merely forgotten to mention that all the students wore designer clothing last seen on the runway. Era's confidence started seeping out through her toes, and she suddenly felt entirely underdressed. She stared down at her Puma runners, feeling embarrassed, and then feeling bad about feeling embarrassed because those shoes had been her birthday present. The strawberry blonde girl swept past Era, disregardful of the clothes Era was wearing and fussing over. She pushed through the blue front doors like she owned the place and disappeared from Era's sight. Era silently scolded herself for being so worried and reassured herself that everything was going to go fine, just like how she'd imagined. Then she pushed the doors, and oddly enough, the doors hadn't seemed as light as they'd looked when the blonde girl went through them. Era struggled for a humiliating 3 seconds before she burst through the doors, outraged at how heavy the doors really were. She must have looked so pathetic to onlookers when unable to open the school doors. God, she was such a loser. The blonde girl was nowhere to be found, so Era wandered through the halls aimlessly, looking for signs or a map or anything that could help her get to the headmaster's office without seeming completely clueless. She regretfully recalled seeing and putting away a Gateway Academy school grounds map in the envelope her school necessities list and notices arrived in prior to the start of school. As far as Era knew, the map was safely tucked under some papers and books on her far from organized desk in her bedroom. Suddenly, Era realized that a squeaking sound was bouncing off the walls in the hallway. With terror, it was made clear that it was coming from her sneakers by the staring and the somewhat annoyed expressions on the students' faces Era was passing by. Apparently, Era had stepped in one too many glorious rainwater puddles on her walk up to the school. She hid her face from view with her mitted hand. Yes, she was wearing mittens and felt heat rising to her face. What a great way to start the day. She quickened her pace, and then even more color rose to her cheeks as she accidentally bumped into someone. Her heart thumping like crazy out of frustration from how her day was going, she removed her hand from her face and looked up into the pleasant green eyes of the guy who was unfortunate enough to cross paths with her. "Sorry," Era blurted, but the guy simply smiled. "You new here?" he asked. To Era's luck, she decided that bumping into this guy was good. Good. He seemed nice enough, and definitely hot enough. She would definitely count him as her first friend at Gateway Academy, and relief filled her. She'd been expecting more of a "watch it" or "look where you're going." The guy's gorgeous smile widened, and Era saw his whiter than white teeth. "Yeah, I am," Era replied, volunteering a little smile of her own. Her heartbeat began to slow, and she was really starting to like this guy despite only having spoken a few words to him. The guy thought for a while, and then it seemed he'd settled for "cool." Then he looked like he was searching his mind for something else to say, and so Era waited politely while taking off her stupid-looking mittens. The heat in the school was overwhelming her. "Do you want me to give you a tour or something?" he said, beaming, but then he furrowed his eyebrows and sighed, shaking his head. "Never mind. I think a tour of the whole school would take hours. The place is huge. I don't even think I've been everywhere yet. Sorry, I'm not very good at dealing with new students. I just transferred here late last year, so..." Then he chuckled, which was the most amazing sound in the world to Era. He was so sweet. He lit up again. "Oh, but I could show you around the main building. That's the building we're in right now. It's where most of the classes take place." Ugh. Era laughed. "No, it's okay. What's your name?" He widened his eyes adorably. "Oh, sorry, I can't believe I didn't tell you yet." Then he did some muttering under his breath, like, "Dang, isn't that supposed to be the first thing you do when you meet someone new? God, I'm horrible at this." He then extended his arm for Era to shake his hand, making Era giggle. What was up with this guy? It was like he wasn't good at meeting new people who were his age or something. Era also had the odd feeling that perhaps he hadn't been to school, you know, like school with other kids as much as Era had. She also began to wonder whether she'd seen him somewhere before. It was a weird feeling, so she brushed it off. Shaking hands, he introduced himself finally. "I'm Justin Barrick." Era smiled back at him brightly. "Era Jules, nice to meet you, Justin. And no, I just needed to find my way to the headmaster's office." Justin nodded. "Well, that one's easy. Just look for the hallway with the most cobwebs." "Just kidding. It's down to your right. Just keep going till the end." Era awkwardly let go of Justin's hand and smiled nervously up at him. "'Kay, thanks. I hope to see you in class or something," Era said truthfully. Then she turned and, shoes still squeaking, she headed off to her left. Your other right," Era heard Justin holler back at her. Era's face flushed immediately. "Oh, right," she mumbled, and avoided eye contact with Justin. Great. Now the hottest guy in school, assumably, thought she was an idiot who couldn't tell her left from her right. Pause. Okay, so this is actually based on a true story from my life. It wasn't a hot guy that was like giving me directions or something, but I was in elementary school and a teacher told me to go to my right and I went to my left and I was so embarrassed. And she was like, "Your other right." So yeah, this was a real conversation that happened to me because I cannot take direction and I don't know my left from my right. Yeah, funny story. She was just blanking out, that was all. But she forced herself to keep going. Her hopes turned backwards. She hoped she would never see Justin again. It'd be too embarrassing. And if she did, it would probably be when she would be spying on him talking about the new girl who I don't even know why got admitted into the school. So much for her first friend at Gateway. She sighed and cursed her own clumsiness. Arriving at the oak door, she saw a metal plate with Headmaster Plume etched into it, and she knocked gently, her heartbeat rising again. "Come in," the voice inside said, and so Era turned the knob and was gratefully relieved that this door was simpler to open than the previous. "Hi, I'm Era Jules," Era said, closing the door and turning to her new school's headmaster. She wiped her palms on her jeans and smiled anxiously. The headmaster seemed like a wise man who did not tolerate much bad behavior. He had reading glasses and some gray hair. He appeared to be a much respected guy. My descriptions when I was 12 are really funny. "Era," the headmaster smiled warmly. "I was expecting you. Did you take your time? Perhaps you'd like another copy of the Gateway school map." It was like he had read Era's mind. She smiled with more earnest? Okay, that doesn't make sense. It would be like more earnestness, I guess. She smiled with more earnest this time, taking the map the headmaster held out for her. "Thanks," she said. He must have been familiar with new students getting quite lost on the campus and forgetting to bring their own maps, which made Era feel slightly better about her mishaps. "Here," he added, pulling more things from under his desk. Era apprehensively held out her arms as Plume gave her 3 textbooks, a planner, and a few sheets of paper. "Thank you," Era replied politely, although her face was scrunched up, concentrating on her attempt to balance all the books properly. Plume nodded unhelpfully and paid no attention to Era's struggles. He had turned back to looking down at the papers on his desk, his fingers on his glasses as if afraid they would fall off. "You're welcome. Go find your first class." Era didn't respond. She was too busy stuffing as much as she could fit into her Roxy backpack. Pause. Okay, so Roxy was like a brand that a lot of people had in my middle school, so I always thought Roxy was like so cool. As much as she tried, she could only fit in 1 textbook. Her backpack was already packed with all her other school supplies. She could not express how much she wanted to get to her new locker already and just shove everything inside. She made a few grunts of difficulty trying to swing her bag over her shoulder while picking up the papers she dropped before when shoving that 1 textbook inside her backpack. She held the 2 textbooks in her one hand and the corners were digging badly into her skin. She topped that pile with the papers and then reached over for the door, glad that Headmaster Plume acted as if she wasn't there, even though she was making quite a fool of herself. As soon as Era was in the halls, she blew out a sigh. Era rushed down the halls, ignoring the appalled looks of many students, and found her locker. She first set all her stuff on the shiny and obviously recently mopped floor, then stood up, opening her locker easily. "Thanks," Era muttered towards God, for being able to at least open her locker without making a scene. She placed her stuff inside and kept the things she needed for her first 2 periods of classes after she reviewed her timetable. She also made sure to keep her map on hand. She closed the locker and stared at the rows of shiny, polished purple-blue lockers everywhere, while she took steps forward cautiously while staring at her map. Era's first period class was 10th grade mathematics, and it was in the classroom B8. She let out a gasp accidentally as she paused in her tracks, still staring at her map in disbelief. Most of her core classes took place in the building she was standing in, called the main building, but past the big grass field was a recreation building. It was where the art classroom was, with an indoor ice rink, an indoor swimming pool, a fitness room, another gym, and more. She assumed most classes there would be electives. Wow. Era set foot into the math classroom and quietly sat into an empty desk. Class hadn't started yet. Era took out her supplies in preparation. Her ears perked up as she heard some girls' laughter and chatters. Era didn't look up as the group of girls came into the classroom. "Lucky bitch!" a girl exclaimed. "And I thought you said your mother was strict," another girl replied. But suddenly all the talk quieted. There was silence. Click, clank, click. Era saw a pair of white sandals stop at the edge of her desk with a 1-inch heel. Pedicured toenails peeped out. Slowly, Era lifted her head up to look at the girl. The girl had honey blonde hair with a set of eyes that reminded Era of maple syrup. Her skin was completely flawless, and she was wearing a black sleeveless top which had a drape at the top. She was also wearing a gray pleated skirt. It all looked so sophisticated and expensive. "Can I help you?" Era asked her, not knowing what else to say. She smiled, and her white teeth sparkled against her lip gloss. She was definitely well aware what she looked like. Gorgeous. Yes, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Teal Gallant. Are you new here? She seemed sugary sweet. Plus, she was wearing something that smelled like marshmallows, which might have helped. Yeah, I'm new here. My name is Era Jules, Era replied, still a little timidly. Teal stopped smiling and suddenly looked to be thinking. Her face stayed friendly, however. By any chance, are you related to a jeweler I know named Jacob Jules? Or was he a designer? Era's breath caught. Her dad. Before she could say anything, Teal placed her elegant hand on her desk to display a ring, the exact same pinky ring that the tall blonde girl had been wearing. It was banded with gold and had a diamond-encrusted A attached to it. A wave of realization overcame Era. Of course, her dad had told her all about his clients, one of which had been Gateway Academy. Once Era had even gotten admitted into the school, her dad had printed several history sheets about this group of students there called the Alphas that he apparently made rings for, membership rings. Unfortunately, the sheets had too much typing on them, and Era had been lazy. She didn't read as much as she should have. So far, she only knew that there was a group of up to 16 Gateway students who were elected to become Alphas. There was an Alpha Boys leader and an Alpha Girls leader. Her dad had told her that the Alphas were famous and that every 4 years they pick new ones because the old ones would have graduated. He got all excited, thinking Era herself could become one since she was coincidentally in the same grade. Era made a quick mental note to herself to make sure to read the rest of the papers, which were also filed on her desk when she got home from school that day. Yeah, he's my father, a designer, Era replied, hoping then that Teal wouldn't give her some kind of pop quiz on how much she knew about the Alphas just because her dad designed the rings they all wore. Well then, welcome to Gateway Academy, she said. Era sat, fiddling nervously with her fingers, watching her head back and whisper to her friends. There was a girl with curly dark brown hair and green eyes that were indescribable. She was very pretty. Another girl had blonde hair and lichen-colored eyes, her face dotted with the cutest freckles Era had ever seen. Era did find that each one of those girls wore the Alpha's pinky ring. Her dad was right. She really did want to become an Alpha after seeing those girls, all decked out in their designer coats, their makeup looking professionally done for them. By staring at those 3 girls all through the math class, Era decided on her own that, from the looks of everything, Teal was the one Era had to make a good impression on. Teal was leading the girls because Era saw the blonde one nodding at whatever Teal was saying, and the brunette was listening very intently. For an instant, Era wondered whether they were talking about her or not. She was so busy watching the girls, along with most of the rest of the class, eyes seemed to just be drawn towards them, that she didn't even notice when Justin walked into the class or when he waved at her. It may have just been their flawlessness. Era concluded that Teal was definitely the Alpha Girls leader. It was just her vibe. Era stopped staring immediately when the brunette turned her piercing green eyes on her. Era swore they were like laser beams. At the back of Era's mind, somehow she knew that she ought to know more about the Alphas, especially since every member was almost as famous as a celebrity. The Alphas got caught up in paparazzi and were sometimes interviewed on various talk shows. Era realized with regret that she had always been too absorbed in her own little world, so throughout the class she peered at those girls a lot. So much that Era didn't get her math page done, so much that by the time the class was over, she couldn't remember the math teacher's name, which wasn't something Era was too worried about. Her next class, history, was much better. Justin was in her class again, and seemingly no other Alpha girls. It was sort of relieving, as much as Era did enjoy watching them earlier. Those girls had just been the type of people it was difficult to look away from. Era helped herself to the seat next to Justin, even though she'd promised herself not to give in to his presence. She'd remembered how idiotic she'd acted, but when Justin saw her sitting next to him, he managed to make Era feel alright about herself again. He smiled like she was the highlight of his day. It was much more relaxing than being in the same room as those girls. Era got to know Justin better, and he was really turning out to be a good friend. Justin introduced Era to his friend too, Louis Overberry, who was in the same history class. Then he also gestured to Eldon Reeve, who was sitting in the other side of the classroom. Suddenly, Era noticed silver bands on both Justin and Louis' thumbs. There was an A etched into it. Whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa. Back it up now. Were Louis and Justin Alpha Boys? Era squinted and twisted her neck to see the ring on Justin's thumb more clearly. Yep, it was her dad's design. It was definitely an Alpha ring. Then she glanced at Eldon and found him wearing the same thing. Gosh. Era's chances just seemed to be getting better and better. If Alpha Boys had any say in who becomes an Alpha Girl, well, Era didn't think they did, but it was pretty good to have alpha boys like you, right? Era always got along better with boys than girls anyway. Era even noticed that some other girls in the class were giving her evil looks. They must have been jealous. Era couldn't blame them either. Justin Barrick was one good-looking guy, and as a matter of fact, so was Louis, who was sitting next to Justin on his other side. Era never saw those 3 girls from math again that day, but she did notice some other girls who had those same pinky rings on, and also boys with the thumb rings. The girls' rings sparkled a lot, and so they were easy to see. Besides, the girls and boys stood out from the crowd just by themselves anyway. The bell rang, dismissing the students and announcing that the school day was finally over. Era had to admit she liked her first day at a private school. Sure, everyone was richer than her and possibly stuck up. In fact, she couldn't wait to tell her mom all about it, especially about the fashion when her mom picked her up. Era thought happily about wearing her own designer clothing and shopping for it. The best part, she'd heard of stores like Bergdorf, Goodman, and Saks before, so she planned to Google the nearest locations to her house. She wanted to go there straight away. The hard part would be spending such big amounts of money. Back when Era's family wasn't so wealthy, Era had been used to saving her allowance. Era's head was completely in the skies as she walked through the halls to her locker. When she opened it, an ivory parchment fluttered out. Era shoved her stuff in her locker in a rush and then picked up the paper quickly, scared it would fly off or get crushed under someone's foot. Era read the words formed by a sparkly pink gel pen quickly, her mouth slightly open the whole time. Era Joels, the Alpha Girls invite you to meet them at the address below, 1243 Caradane Street, Brooks Road, at the time below, 7 p.m. We are expecting to see you tonight. Teal will be the hostess. Kisses from all of us, the Alpha Girls. Oh my god, and that's the end? Okay, that's the end of this chapter. I thought that this chapter would be a little longer, and I also thought that it would talk more about Era's home life, like her family and stuff, but it didn't. That just goes to show you it's been a really long time since I've read this. Okay, so it was just about her school day, her first day at school. Okay, I get you. I get you, old past Julie. Era is supposed to have Asian ancestry, so she's supposed to be like, I think part Asian and part white, but if I turn this into a TV show, I might cast like a fully Asian girl to play Era or something. I don't know yet, but in the books, what I remember is I made Era have like black hair and blue eyes because when I was 12, I really liked how Megan Fox looked, and I wanted Era to kind of look like a very young, you know, 15-year-old version of Megan Fox, I guess. But not like exactly like Megan Fox, like different face shape and everything, but like the same eye color and the same hair color. Also like Memoirs of a Geisha, you know, the main character, she's Chinese but she has blue eyes, kind of like looking like that. That was my idea for her appearance. I don't know, I guess it didn't really get into talking much about how Era looks in this chapter, which I wasn't expecting. I was expecting that I would have written a bit more about Era's looks, but I guess I didn't. Stay tuned and I will read chapter 2 in the future, probably, because this chapter is actually really short, and I feel like we need more. I mean, I don't know if I will read the entire novel because it's literally 559 pages, but I'll definitely probably read chapter 2 as well. And then if you guys want more and more, then I'll keep reading. But, you know, this was just an idea that I had, like this read with me kind of like Audible book slash kind of like, it's like reading, but it's like video game form of reading, because then you can have like my little screen at the bottom and everything, a little image of me reading, and it's kind of like how people do their like video game videos on YouTube. That was just sort of my idea, but thinking back on this idea, it is a little bit impractical to read for so long. I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's doable. It's just that it's kind of giving me a sore throat a little. Anyway, I should shut up now. Hopefully what I said just now made sense a little. Thanks for reading with me. This chapter ended on a cliffhanger. The Alpha Girls invited Era to see them that night. Bye, jujubes!